Hello. Today I'm going to talk to you about making textures in your images. So there's um, different ways to do that. One of them is a brush technique, but another is scanning different images and making a clipping mask. And I've done a bit of a brief demonstration on this before, but I'm going to do a more um, variety of different things with this one. So I have scanned here a piece of old ledger paper. Um, and these are some drawings that I had done years ago. And so this might be the way you started. This is how I used to work in Illustrator, where I have a collection of lines. So you can see where this is highlighted. And if I click on this line, that's a part of it. Um, there's a line. So I was trying to encourage you when you're drawing something to try to make it closed shapes, because the next step of this is if you want to fill this in with color, if you go to take something like this that you've worked on and you, oops, I grabbed the one above it, let me select that, just grab this again. Okay, so if I want to fill it with color, if I go to my fill and I give it a color, you see there's a wacky pattern there. And the Pathfinder tool, which is so great at taking shapes, so if you had all these different shapes and say they were different colors, like this, and you had done all this drawing and you wanted to combine them, you can take them and go with the Pathfinder, which has so many different options, and you can make it one unit, or you can cut something out so it makes different pieces. So if you switch, you can see how you do that. So if you had drawn all these lines here, and I've grabbed this other image here, let me get that out of the way. If you were to grab all of this and try to use the Pathfinder, it's not going to work because, again, they're not closed shapes. So it did a little bit of work for you, but then it filled in other areas that you might not want filled in. So what you would need to do then, is to go and draw, if you wanted to fill this in with color like I've done here, what you would do is you would select that image and you would lock it, okay? And then you could go and take your pen tool and you can go and draw around the shape. So I'm just going to pretend I did this whole thing and go back so that I get the little circle showing there. And then I would be able to go and fill it with a color, get rid of that outline, and send it to the back. And that's how I could fill it like I did this. Now I wanted to show you with this one, see how I've got the background a little off center? That is something that you can do for effect. So if everything's a little sort of off register, that's a fun play that you can have on something. Also, you could go in and say you wanted to perhaps select this leaf. Now see, the reason why I showed you how to lock that shape before, let me go back in here, is because if I get too close with the pen tool, if I start trying to trace this, see what just happened there? So when oh my goodness, what I've done. What I was trying to say is if I have my pen tool and I get too close, I can end up, no, I'm not doing it, right there. So what I did was I ended up trying to draw a line and I joined an existing line. So that can happen and you want to make sure that it doesn't. And so if you lock the drawing you did beforehand, then you won't have that problem. So the reason why I went in and played with this shape here is because you might want to, again, play with the feeling of off register, but you can go and fill different things in a different flip-floppy way. And then I'll bring that line, arrange, bring to the front. Oops, you know what else I did? I think, did I? They're all the same layer. Let me grab this, arrange, to the front. Okay, there. So then by bringing the outline to front, it gives you sort of an interesting feel right there. That wasn't terribly artistic, but, and then the other thing that you can do is you can play with the opacity. So if I go in here and I change that opacity, that gives it an interesting feel too. So you could go and put, perhaps you put a whole bunch of different shapes around something. And you play with the opacity. That can also give a texture. And then if you just change some of the color a little, I'm sort of winging this because that's what it is sometimes. It's just kind of experimenting and playing with something. But you have to have in your head a feeling of what you want. And so I've put some resource images around so that you could, you know, I just put square shapes in here, but you would want to do something more organic depending on what you're doing. Okay, so you can see how this has already given this some more texture, some more life, even though it's not planned out and thoughtful. Now another thing is I have scanned this old ledger paper and I put, this is an outline that I drew by putting, locking all these separate individual lines, doing a tracing around that. Now I have put it over top of this ledger paper, and by holding down the Shift key, I am selecting both, or I can drag over and select both. And then I go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make, and then see what happens? I get this pattern right in there. So now this pattern doesn't feel right for this flower, but I was playing around before doing this. So I have this funky shape here, and I can go up and Clipping Mask, Release. So here you see I've got my paper, and that line is still here, but after I make a clipping mask, it disappears to not having an outline. So here is my funky little shape. I've got the shape that I want to fill on top and the paper behind, and I have both selected. That's selected, and this is selected. It doesn't look like this is selected because whenever you select anything, it does a bigger rectangle. See the way that it does a bigger rectangle of everything that's in there. So when I go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make, and there's my funky shape. So I could play with all different kinds of textures, and I could put that. It won't go to the back because I have added some different layers here. So I actually would want that blue layer in the background. So if I wanted to play with some heavier, interesting shapes, then I could put those on a separate layer. Now also when I move it, when I go to move, see the way I get that big box around there? So that's one thing that you may want, reason why you might want to have another layer is because when you try to grab some things, you might end up getting more stuff that you want, because what this is that is the shape of the artwork. So it's always attached to it. So it can be a little bit cumbersome having something so big on your board. So if you set it up and then lock that layer, it won't, lock that layer, it won't get in your way. Another thing I want to point out, so when I made that clipping mask, I lost that outline. So if you want to have the outline, you can't just go back and say, all right, I want a stroke and I want it to be, you know, this color. Oh, it does work. Excellent. So you can go back and you can put that stroke in there and play with the thickness of it and do different funky things with it. Although it looks crisper and more interesting to me if it doesn't have any stroke. Okay. No stroke. Okay. All right. So now what I am, there was one thing I wanted to show you. I forget what it was, but I have some more things on another layer and it'll come back to me. So over here, I have this image where you can see that there's a lot of flat colors, but also to give it a little bit of dimension or texture, there are these different patterns in here. So they're mixed with different colors. So this green color is the same color that's the top of the pattern, but then a brighter color behind. And you can see some colors are quite intense and other colors are dull. This has a more monochromatic background. This has a brighter color, and that's intentional. It's supposed to be the water in the ground level there. So what I want to show you down here, and slowly, this is a very large file. Okay, so down here I've taken one of these shapes that I've worked with. So when I click over it, you can see that was a pattern that keeps repeating. So I have made a mask of this. So if I go and select it, go to clipping mask and say release, I get here 1, my pattern, 2, my background, and there is also a clipping mask in here. So what I did when I worked on this, because I wanted to have a solid color behind it, I did copy and paste. So I had 2 of these. And then I took this over top of my pattern, and then I grabbed it. Now this pattern repeats a lot, so if I had not taken as much, like to there, notice how that pattern doesn't even need to be part of this clipping mask. And then I go up to clipping mask, make. Now it says that there's an object that's in different groups, so I do need to select all of them. So if you get messages like that, it means you need to grab everything that was in there. Okay, so now I can make it. And so now I copied this other pattern because I wanted it to have a solid color behind it. So that is how I did that. And then I would group it. And I have multiple layers in this file. So this is the land. So that would stay on that file that's got the red line that helps me distinguish that. Okay. So going back to this file, I still haven't remembered what it was I wanted to show you. So I will end this and come back with another video of some other materials as well.